The preacher's daughter wasn't supposed to be standing in the general store with tears streaming down her face, but Priscilla Caldwell had given up on what she was supposed to do weeks ago. She clutched a bolt of ivory silk against her chest, the fabric her mother had ordered for a wedding dress that would bind her to a man she could barely stand to look at, let alone love. "You all right there, miss?" The voice came from behind her, deep and gentle, carrying the soft drawl of someone who'd spent years under open skies. Priscilla quickly wiped her eyes and turned, finding herself face to face with a man she'd never seen before in Loveland, Colorado. He was tall, built lean and strong from hard work, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of sagebrush. His hat was dusty from the trail, and he wore simple clothing that marked him as a working cowboy, not one of the wealthy ranch owners who strutted around town like peacocks. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice catching on the words. He studied her for a moment, and something in his gaze told her he knew exactly how fine she wasn't. "Name's Isaac O'Brien," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Just rode in from Montana, looking for work." "Don't mean to intrude, but you got the look of someone carrying a burden too heavy for one person." Priscilla opened her mouth to send him away with polite words and a fake smile, the way she'd been taught since childhood. But something in his kind eyes and the genuine concern in his voice cracked the careful shell she'd built around herself. "I'm getting married in 3 weeks," she whispered, "to a man I don't love." The shopkeeper, Mrs. Henderson, bustled over with her usual nosiness. "Miss Caldwell, your mother's waiting for you at the church. Best not keep her waiting, especially not chatting with strange men." Isaac stepped back respectfully, but his eyes never left Priscilla's face. "Sometimes the paths we're walking ain't the right ones," he said quietly. "Takes courage to admit that." Priscilla watched him tip his hat and walk toward the feed section of the store, his words echoing in her mind as she gathered the silk and headed out into the bright September afternoon. The year was 1884, and women in Loveland didn't just break engagements, especially not to men like Thornton Blackwell, who practically owned half the county. Her father, Reverend Caldwell, had arranged the match 6 months ago, seeing it as a blessing that such a wealthy man would want his daughter. Never mind that Thornton was cold, controlling, and had made it clear he expected a wife who would be seen and not heard. The walk to the church took her past the Lucky Star Saloon, where she caught sight of Isaac again through the window, talking to the owner. She shouldn't be thinking about him. She shouldn't be thinking about anything except her duty to her family. But that night, as she sat at dinner with Thornton and her parents, all she could think about were those sage-colored eyes, and the way Isaac had spoken to her like she was a person worth listening to, not just a pretty ornament to be positioned according to someone else's wishes. "Priscilla, are you even listening?" Thornton's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "I'm sorry, what were you saying?" His jaw tightened. "I was telling your father about the modifications I'm making to the house. The parlor will need to be repainted, and I'm having the piano removed." "You won't have time for such frivolities once we're married." Priscilla felt her stomach drop. "But I love playing piano. It's an unnecessary expense and takes up valuable space. Besides, you'll be busy managing the household staff and entertaining my business associates. Speaking of which, I've prepared a list of acceptable topics for you to discuss at such gatherings." He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. Reverend Caldwell beamed. "How thoughtful, Thornton. It's good to see a man who takes an interest in shaping his wife properly." Her mother nodded agreement, though Priscilla noticed she wouldn't quite meet her daughter's eyes. "You're very fortunate, dear." Priscilla unfolded the paper with shaking hands. The list included topics like the weather, fashion, and household management, with strict instructions to avoid politics, business, or anything that might make her appear to have opinions of her own. At the bottom, in Thornton's precise handwriting, was a note. A good wife knows when to speak and when to remain silent. I trust you'll learn the difference quickly. The room felt too small, too hot. Priscilla excused herself and fled to her bedroom, where she stood at the window staring out at the mountains in the distance. Those peaks represented freedom, wild and untamed. She'd never been beyond Loveland's borders, never made a choice entirely her own. The next morning, she walked into town to deliver some of her mother's charity baskets to families in need. The last stop was the boarding house where many of the ranch hands stayed when they were between jobs or new to the area. Mrs. Patterson, the owner, thanked her for the basket and mentioned she had a new boarder. "Young cowboy from Montana," Mrs. Patterson said. "Very polite. Actually asked if there was a church in town, said he liked to attend Sunday services. You don't see that often in men his age." Priscilla's heart skipped. Is he looking for work? Found some already at the Riverside Ranch. Mr. Cooper hired him on the spot after seeing him work with horses. Said he had a natural gift. The Riverside Ranch was where Priscilla often rode her mare, Daisy. The owner, Samuel Cooper, was a friend of her father's and had always let her use the trails that cut through his property. She told herself it was coincidence when she saddled up that afternoon and headed in that direction. The ranch was bustling with activity when she arrived. Cattle needed moving to different pastures before winter set in, and the hands were working in organized chaos. She spotted Isaac immediately, working with a young stallion that had a reputation for being difficult. The horse was nervous, dancing and pulling at the lead, but Isaac moved with patience and confidence, his voice low and steady as he calmed the animal. Samuel Cooper noticed her watching. "Quite something, isn't he? That horse has thrown 3 men in the past month." Isaac had him settled in under an hour. "He's good with animals," Priscilla observed, unable to look away. "Good with people, too. Respectful, hardworking, honest. If I had 10 more like him, this ranch would run itself." Samuel paused, then added carefully, "Heard about your upcoming wedding. Thornton's a successful man." The way he said it made it clear that success was the only positive thing he could say about her fiancé. Priscilla didn't respond. Isaac must have felt her watching because he turned, and their eyes met across the corral. He said something to the other hand near him, then led the now calm stallion in her direction. "Miss Caldwell," he greeted her, "didn't expect to see you out here. I often ride these trails. Mr. Cooper is kind enough to allow it. It's beautiful country. Different from Montana, but beautiful in its own way." He stroked the stallion's neck, and the horse leaned into his touch. "This here's Thunder. They tell me he's trouble, but I think he's just misunderstood. Sometimes what looks like stubbornness is really just a desire for freedom." Priscilla felt like he was talking about more than the horse. And what does one do with something that desires freedom? You don't break it. You give it room to choose. A horse that chooses to trust you is worth 10 that are forced. His eyes held hers. "Same goes for people, I reckon." The words hit her like a physical thing. She'd spent so long being told what to do, where to go, who to marry, that she'd forgotten choice was even possible. "Priscilla!" The shout came from the ranch entrance, where Thornton sat astride his expensive gelding, his face tight with displeasure. "What are you doing here?" She turned Daisy toward him. "Riding, as I often do." Thornton rode closer, his eyes raking over Isaac with clear disdain. "Conversing with ranch hands is beneath you. We're leaving." "Actually, I just arrived. I think I'll ride the trail before heading home." His face darkened. "I said we're leaving. A fiancée should obey her future husband." Something in Priscilla snapped. Maybe it was the way he spoke to her like she was a child. Maybe it was the contrast between his cold command and the gentle respect in Isaac's voice. "We're not married yet, Thornton, and when we are, I'll still be a person with her own thoughts and preferences." The silence that followed was deafening. Ranch hands stopped their work to stare. Samuel Cooper cleared his throat uncomfortably. Thornton's face went from red to nearly purple. "You'll regret that insolence," he said quietly, the threat clear in his voice. Then he wheeled his horse around and galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Priscilla's hands shook on the reins. She'd never defied him before, never defied anyone. The exhilaration was quickly replaced by fear. What would he tell her parents? What would be the consequences? "That was brave," Isaac said quietly. She laughed, but it came out shaky. "That was foolish. You don't know what he's like when he's angry. Does he hurt you?" The direct question startled her. "Not physically, but he has ways of making his displeasure known, and he has influence over my father, over everyone in this town." Isaac was quiet for a moment, stroking Thunder's nose thoughtfully. "I've been in Loveland less than a week, so maybe I'm speaking out of turn. But it seems to me that a man who truly cares for a woman would want her to be happy, to have her own thoughts and dreams. Marriage should be a partnership, not ownership. That's not how it works here. Women don't just break engagements." "Why not?" The simple question shook her. Why not? Because her father would be furious. Because Thornton would make sure she was socially ruined. Because she had nowhere else to go, no way to support herself. Because she'd been taught her whole life that duty came before happiness. But as she looked at Isaac, at this man who'd known her for all of 2 days and still treated her with more respect than her fiancé of 6 months, she couldn't think of a single good reason. "I should go," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "If you ever need help," Isaac said, "any kind of help at all, you can find me here. I mean that, Miss Caldwell." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and guided Daisy toward the trail. But instead of the peace she usually found in riding, her mind raced with possibilities and fears. What had she done? What would Thornton do? She found out that evening. Her father summoned her to his study, his face grave. "Thornton came to see me. He's very disappointed in your behavior." "I simply wanted to finish my ride." "You defied him publicly and embarrassed him in front of ranch hands. He's graciously agreed not to break the engagement, but there will be consequences. You're confined to the house until the wedding. No more riding, no more trips to town without your mother or myself as escort, and you'll write Thornton an apology for your disrespect." "Father, please. He was treating me like property." Reverend Caldwell's expression hardened. "He's treating you like what you'll be in 3 weeks, his wife. The sooner you accept your place, the easier this will be. Thornton is a good match, Priscilla. He's wealthy, respected, and willing to overlook your willful nature. You won't do better." "What if I don't want to do better? What if I just want to be free?" "Freedom is an illusion, daughter. We all have duties and obligations. Yours is to marry well and bring honor to this family. Now write that apology." Priscilla spent the next week trapped in her house, watching the world through windows. Her mother kept her busy with wedding preparations, fitting after fitting for the silk dress, discussions of flowers and food and seating arrangements. None of it felt real. She felt like she was watching someone else's life, a play in which she'd been cast without her consent. The only bright moments came on Sunday, when she was allowed to attend church. Isaac was there, sitting in the back pew, and though they couldn't speak, his presence was a comfort. He seemed to understand, giving her small nods of encouragement that helped her breathe a little easier. After the service, as people milled about in the churchyard, Thornton kept her firmly at his side, his hand possessive on her elbow. He was performing for the town, playing the role of devoted fiancé, but his grip was just tight enough to hurt. 2 more weeks, he murmured in her ear, "and then you'll learn what happens to wives who don't know their place." Priscilla felt sick. She'd known Thornton was controlling, but the underlying menace in his voice was new, or perhaps she just never let herself hear it before. That night she couldn't sleep. She stood at her window staring at the mountains and made a decision. She couldn't marry Thornton. Whatever the cost, whatever the consequences, she couldn't spend her life with a man who saw her as something to be managed and controlled. But where could she go? She had no money of her own, no relatives outside of Loveland who would take her in against her father's wishes. She was trapped as surely as if she were in a prison cell. The answer came from an unexpected source. The next morning, her mother sent her to gather eggs from the chicken coop, one of the few outdoor tasks she was still permitted. She found a note tucked under the feed bin, written in careful script. "If you need help leaving, leave a candle in your window tonight. I'll be watching. Isaac." Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. He was offering her escape. But how had he gotten the note here? How had he known she'd find it? The answer came when she saw young Tommy Patterson, the boarding house owner's son, walking past the garden fence. He caught her eye and gave a quick nod before continuing on. Isaac must have paid him to deliver it. All day, Priscilla wrestled with the decision. If she put the candle in the window, there was no going back. She'd be ruining her reputation, devastating her parents, and putting herself entirely in the hands of a man she barely knew. But if she didn't, she'd marry Thornton in 13 days and lose herself completely. That evening, after her parents had gone to bed, she lit a candle and placed it in her window. She waited, her packed bag hidden under her bed. She'd included only essentials: a change of clothes, her mother's Bible, the little money she'd saved from birthday gifts over the years. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. The soft tap on her window came just after midnight. Isaac was outside, having climbed the oak tree that grew close to the house. "You ready?" he whispered. "I don't know where to go. I've been thinking on that. I have family back in Montana near Helena. My sister and her husband run a ranch there. They'd take you in, no questions asked, until you figure out what you want to do. It's a hard ride, about a week if we push, but I know the trails. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." In the moonlight, his expression was serious. "Because everyone deserves the chance to choose their own life, and because I've seen what happens when people stay in situations that break their spirit. My mother did that, stayed with my father even though he was cruel. By the time she finally left, there wasn't much of her left to save. I won't watch that happen to someone else if I can help it." Priscilla's eyes filled with tears. "If we're caught, Thornton will make sure you're arrested. My father will press charges for kidnapping." "Then we better not get caught. You coming or not?" She looked back at her room, at the life she'd known for 21 years. Then she grabbed her bag and climbed out the window. Isaac caught her as she dropped from the tree, steadying her with gentle hands. "I've got 2 horses ready, supplies for the journey. We need to ride hard tonight to get distance between us and anyone who might follow." They moved through the darkness like ghosts, avoiding the main streets, keeping to the shadows. The horses were waiting at the edge of town, exactly where Isaac had said they'd be. He helped her mount, then swung up onto his own horse with practiced ease. "Last chance to change your mind," he said. Priscilla looked back at Loveland, at the church steeple visible in the moonlight, at everything she'd ever known. Then she looked at Isaac, at the freedom represented by the open trail ahead. "Let's go." They rode through the night, pushing the horses as hard as they dared. Isaac knew the land, choosing paths that avoided main roads and towns. As the sun rose, painting the mountains gold and pink, they finally slowed to let the horses rest. "How are you holding up?" Isaac asked, passing her a canteen. "I keep waiting to feel guilty," Priscilla admitted. but mostly I just feel relieved. Guilt might come later, that's normal, but you did the right thing." "Did I? I've ruined my family's reputation, broken a formal engagement, and run away in the night. None of those are things a good person does." Isaac dismounted and stretched, then helped her down from her horse. "A good person makes choices that honor their own truth. You weren't meant for a life with that man, Priscilla. Anyone with eyes could see it." They were standing close, and Priscilla found herself noticing details she'd been too nervous to see before. The way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar, the scar above his left eyebrow, the kindness in his eyes, which she now saw were green gold, like sunlight through leaves. "Tell me about Montana," she said, needing to break the sudden tension. As they rested the horses and ate some of the dried beef and biscuits Isaac had packed, he told her about Helena, about mountains that touched the sky and rivers so clear you could see the rocks at the bottom. He spoke of his sister, Margaret, and her husband, James, who'd built their ranch from nothing and were making a good life there. "Margaret's strong-willed like you," he said with a smile. "She left home at 19 to marry James, even though our father forbade it. Best decision she ever made." "You must miss her." "I do. That's part of why I was heading back north when I stopped in Loveland. I'd been working ranches down in Texas, saving money, but I was ready to go home." He paused. "Guess home will have to wait a bit longer." Priscilla felt a stab of guilt. "You don't have to do this. You could point me north and I could find my way. You ever traveled alone before? Ever slept under stars, dealt with mountain lions or rattlesnakes or men who see a woman alone as easy prey?" His voice was gentle but firm. "I'm seeing this through, Priscilla. I gave you my word." They rode for 6 more days, settling into a rhythm. Isaac taught her how to read the land, how to find water, how to make camp quickly and efficiently. At night, he laid out their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, always respectable, always proper. They talked for hours before sleep, sharing stories of their lives. Priscilla learned that Isaac was 24, that he'd left home at 16 to escape his father's temper, that he'd worked his way across the West learning everything he could about horses and cattle. He had a dream of owning his own small ranch someday. Nothing fancy, just enough land to breed quality horses. She told him about her childhood in the preacher's house, always being watched, always expected to be perfect. She confessed that she loved to draw but had been told it was frivolous. She admitted she'd never really had a friend, that everyone in Loveland treated her as the preacher's daughter first and a person second. "What do you want?" Isaac asked one night as they sat by the fire. "Not what your parents want, not what society expects. What does Priscilla Caldwell want from life?" No one had ever asked her that. She thought for a long time. "I want to wake up in the morning and feel excited about the day. I want to make my own choices, even if they're wrong sometimes. I want to laugh without worrying if it's too loud. I want to matter to someone, not because of who my father is or how I can benefit them, but just because I'm me." Isaac watched her across the flames, his expression unreadable. "You matter," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, you matter to me." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. On the 7th day, as they climbed higher into the mountains, a storm rolled in fast. Rain fell in sheets, turning the trail to mud. Lightning cracked across the sky, spooking the horses. Isaac led them to a small cave he knew, barely big enough for the 4 of them, humans and horses crowded together. They were soaked through, shivering despite it being September. Isaac built a small fire at the cave entrance, then insisted Priscilla change into dry clothes while he turned his back. She did the same for him, trying not to notice the strong lines of his shoulders and back visible through his wet undershirt before he changed. "We'll need to stay here until the storm passes," he said, checking the horses. "Could be hours." They sat close to the fire, wrapped in their blankets. The storm raged outside, but in the cave, it was oddly peaceful. Priscilla found herself studying Isaac's profile in the firelight, the strong jaw, the thoughtful expression. He'd given up a week of his life to help her, asked for nothing in return, treated her with unfailing respect and kindness. "Isaac," she said softly. He turned to look at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "Thank you for everything, for seeing me when no one else did, for giving me a chance at a real life. Priscilla." Her name was rough in his throat. "I need to tell you something. These past days, riding with you, talking with you, I've come to care for you. More than I should, probably. More than is wise for a cowboy with nothing to offer a preacher's daughter." Her heart was racing. "You've offered me everything. You've offered me freedom and kindness and respect. You've shown me what it's like to be treated as an equal. I don't want to take advantage. You're vulnerable right now, escaping one bad situation. I won't let you fall into another just because I have feelings I shouldn't have." Priscilla reached across the small space between them and took his hand. "What if I have feelings too? What if I've been falling for you since the moment you spoke to me in that general store and saw me, really saw me, not just the role I was supposed to play?" Isaac's hand tightened on hers. "You're sure? Because once we cross this line, everything changes. I've never been more sure of anything." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she met him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, then deeper as she responded. His hand came up to cup her face, his touch reverent, and Priscilla felt like she was finally, truly alive. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I can't offer you much. I've got some savings, but I'm just a ranch hand. You deserve so much more." "I don't want more. I want real. I want honest. I want you." They spent the rest of the storm talking about possibilities, about dreams and futures. Isaac admitted he'd been saving for 3 years, that he had enough to buy a small piece of land and start modest. "It won't be fancy," he warned. "It'll be hard work, long days, uncertain income at first. I'm not afraid of hard work, and I'd rather have a small house filled with love than a mansion filled with cold silence." When the storm finally cleared and they continued their journey, everything was different. They rode closer together, stole kisses during rest stops, talked about a future in plural terms, we instead of I. 2 days later, they reached Helena, Montana. The town was smaller than Loveland but bustling with energy. Isaac led them to a ranch about 5 miles outside town, where a woman came running from the house as soon as she spotted them. "Isaac." Margaret O'Brien was tall and strong, with her brother's same green-gold eyes. She threw her arms around him, then stepped back and noticed Priscilla. "And who's this?" "This is Priscilla Caldwell. She needed help getting away from a bad situation in Colorado. I told her you might be willing to let her stay here while she figures out her next steps." Margaret's sharp eyes took in their proximity to each other, the way Isaac's hand hovered protectively near Priscilla's back, the looks passing between them. A knowing smile crossed her face. "Just helping out, is that all?" Isaac had the grace to look embarrassed. "Meg, don't start." "Oh, this is going to be good. Come on inside, both of you. James will want to meet the woman who finally caught my wandering brother's eye." Over dinner, Priscilla shared an edited version of her story, leaving out some of the more painful details. Margaret listened with sympathy and no judgment. "You can stay here as long as you need," she said firmly. "We've got a spare room, and honestly, I could use another woman around here. It's me, James, and 6 ranch hands. I'm drowning in testosterone." James O'Brien laughed. "She's not wrong. Stay, Miss Caldwell. You'll be safe here, and we're always glad to help family." I'm not family, Priscilla protested. Margaret and James exchanged a look. Yet, Margaret said meaningfully, her eyes twinkling. Over the next weeks, Priscilla settled into life on the ranch. She helped Margaret with the cooking and housework, learned to tend the vegetable garden, and started to understand the rhythms of ranch life. Isaac had signed on as one of James's hands, and Priscilla saw him every day, their relationship deepening with each passing hour. He courted her properly, despite the teasing from the other ranch hands. He brought her wildflowers he picked on the range. He taught her to ride better, patiently correcting her form and praising her progress. They took long walks in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, building a foundation of friendship beneath the growing love. "I don't want to rush you," Isaac said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the mountains purple. "I know you just escaped one engagement. The last thing you need is pressure for another." Priscilla turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "Isaac, what I had with Thornton wasn't an engagement, it was a prison sentence. What we have is completely different. I love you. I've loved you since you climbed that tree to help me escape, maybe even before that. I'm not afraid of commitment. I'm just afraid of committing to the wrong person. And you are absolutely the right person." His face lit up with joy. "You love me. I love you. I love you too. God, Priscilla, I love you so much it scares me sometimes. You're everything I never knew I was looking for." He dropped to one knee right there in the grass. "I don't have a ring yet, and I know I should do this proper, but I can't wait another second. Priscilla Caldwell, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, start a ranch together, face whatever comes side by side?" Tears streamed down her face. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed. When he set her down, they kissed as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, the sky blazing with color like a blessing. Margaret insisted on helping plan the wedding. "Nothing fancy," Priscilla said. "I just want something real. Real it is. We'll do it here at the ranch, invite the neighbors, have a proper celebration." But first, there was something Priscilla needed to do. She wrote a letter to her parents, her hand shaking as she formed the words. "Dear Mother and Father, I know my actions have caused you pain and embarrassment, and for that I am truly sorry. But I cannot be sorry for leaving. Thornton would have made me miserable, and I would have made him equally so. I've found happiness here in Montana, found someone who loves me for who I am, not who he wants me to be. His name is Isaac O'Brien, and he's a good man with a kind heart. We're getting married next month. I don't expect your blessing or your attendance, but I wanted you to know that I'm safe and I'm happy. I hope someday you can forgive me. Your daughter, Priscilla." She didn't know if they'd write back. Part of her hoped they would, but she was prepared for silence. The answer came 3 weeks later in a letter from her mother. Priscilla's hands shook as she opened it. "Dearest Priscilla, your father is still too angry to write, but I needed you to know that despite everything, you are still my daughter and I still love you. Thornton was furious when you disappeared. He made things very difficult for us for a while, but his pride wouldn't allow him to remain publicly jilted for long. He's since become engaged to Martha Simmons, the banker's daughter. Your father believes this is for the best. As for me, I remember being young and feeling trapped. I made different choices than you did, choices I've sometimes regretted. I cannot give you my blessing as that would go against your father, but I can give you my love. Be happy, my girl. It sounds like you found what I never had. Your mother." Priscilla cried as she read it, a mixture of sadness and relief. It wasn't everything she'd hoped for, but it was something. Her mother understood, and that mattered more than she could say. The wedding took place on a golden October afternoon. Margaret had helped Priscilla make a simple dress from cream-colored cotton, with lace at the collar and sleeves. She wore wildflowers in her hair, the same kind Isaac had been bringing her for weeks. The ceremony was performed by a traveling preacher who happened through Helena regularly. About 30 people attended, ranch families from the area who'd come to know and like the O'Briens. It was nothing like the grand affair her wedding to Thornton would have been, and Priscilla wouldn't have changed a single thing. Isaac stood at the makeshift altar in his best clothes, his eyes shining with love as she walked toward him. James gave her away, and Margaret stood as her witness. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. I, Isaac O'Brien, take you, Priscilla Caldwell, to be my wife. I promise to honor you, respect you, and love you all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner in all things, to listen to your thoughts and value your opinions, to build a life with you where we both have voice and choice. I promise to make you laugh, to hold you when you cry, and to never make you feel like anything less than the remarkable woman you are. Priscilla's vows were equally personal. I, Priscilla Caldwell, take you, Isaac O'Brien, to be my husband. I promise to love you, support you, and stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise to be your partner in building our dreams, to work as hard as you do to make our ranch succeed, to share the burdens and the joys equally. You gave me freedom when I desperately needed it, and now I freely give you my heart, my life, and my future. I love you more than words can say. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Isaac kissed her, the small crowd erupted in cheers. The celebration that followed was full of music, dancing, and laughter. Priscilla danced with Isaac, with James, with several of the neighboring ranchers. She felt light, free, happier than she'd ever imagined possible. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Isaac led her to the small cabin James had helped him build over the past month. It was tiny, just 2 rooms, but it was theirs. Isaac had made furniture by hand, and Margaret had contributed curtains and linens. There was even a small bookshelf, currently empty. I know it's not much, Isaac said, suddenly nervous, but it's a start. Once we get the ranch going, we can build something bigger. Priscilla turned to him, her eyes bright. It's perfect. It's ours, and that makes it perfect. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a discovery of each other that left them both breathless and awed. Afterward, lying in Isaac's arms, Priscilla thought about the path that had led her here. If someone had told her 3 months ago that she'd run away in the night, travel across territories, and marry a cowboy she barely knew, she would have thought them insane. But every choice, every risk, had been worth it to end up here, with this man, building this life. The next months were hard work but filled with joy. They bought 50 acres of decent grazing land with Isaac's savings and a loan from the bank. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. They started with a small herd of cattle and a few good horses, building slowly. Priscilla learned skills she'd never imagined needing. She could mend fences, help birth calves, break a young horse to saddle. Her hands grew calloused, her skin tanned from long days in the sun. She'd never felt more beautiful, more capable, more alive. Isaac was everything a partner should be. He taught her what he knew without condescension, valued her ideas about the ranch, and shared both the work and the decisions. They argued sometimes, healthy disagreements about the best way to handle a situation, but they always talked things through until they found a solution they both could live with. In the spring, Priscilla discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror. They were still building the ranch, still struggling financially. Was this the right time? "There's never a perfect time," Margaret said wisely when Priscilla voiced her fears. "But you two love each other. You're both hard workers and you have family nearby to help. You'll figure it out." Isaac was over the moon. He immediately started building an addition to their cabin, a nursery for the baby. He became absurdly protective, trying to keep Priscilla from doing heavy work until she sat him down and explained that she was pregnant, not fragile. "The doctor says I'm healthy and the baby's fine. I can still work, just maybe not wrestling steers or breaking broncos. I just want to keep you safe, both of you." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We're safe. We're happy. We're exactly where we're meant to be." Their son was born in December, arriving during a snowstorm that trapped them in the cabin for 3 days. Margaret had made it over just in time to help with the delivery, and Isaac held Priscilla's hand through all of it, whispering encouragement and love. They named him Daniel Isaac O'Brien, and he was perfect. Priscilla held him and marveled at the tiny life they'd created, the physical proof of their love. "He's got your eyes," Isaac said, touching the baby's tiny hand with one gentle finger. "And your stubborn chin," Priscilla replied with a laugh. The first year of Daniel's life was exhausting and wonderful. Sleep was scarce, money was tight, but they had each other and they had their son. The ranch was growing, gaining a reputation for quality horses. Isaac had a gift for breeding and training, and word was spreading. Priscilla found she had a head for the business side of things. She managed their accounts, negotiated sales, and handled the paperwork that Isaac hated. They made a good team, complementing each other's strengths and shoring up each other's weaknesses. When Daniel was 2, Priscilla received another letter from her mother. Her father had passed away suddenly, a heart attack in his study. The letter was full of grief, but also a tentative olive branch. "I'm alone now," her mother wrote. "I've been thinking about mistakes and missed opportunities. I would very much like to meet my grandson if you would permit it. I understand if you can't forgive me for not standing up for you, but I hope you might allow an old woman to try to make amends." Priscilla showed the letter to Isaac. "What do you think?" "I think that's entirely up to you. She's your mother. But for what it's worth, Daniel should know his grandmother if possible, and people can change given the chance." After much thought and discussion, Priscilla wrote back, inviting her mother to visit. 3 months later, Clara Caldwell arrived in Helena on the stage, looking older and smaller than Priscilla remembered. The reunion was awkward at first, full of apologies and tears. But when Clara held Daniel for the first time, something in her face softened. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "You've built a good life here, Priscilla. A real life." Clara stayed for 2 weeks, and by the time she left, the rift between mother and daughter had begun to heal. She returned to Colorado promising to visit again, and she kept that promise, coming twice a year until her death 5 years later. The ranch continued to prosper. Isaac's reputation as a horse trainer spread across Montana and into neighboring territories. They were able to buy more land, build a bigger house, expand their herd. They never became wealthy by Thornton Whitmore's standards, but they had enough, and they had each other. Priscilla gave birth to 2 more children, a daughter they named Margaret Rose after Isaac's sister, and another son they called Samuel James after the men who'd helped them build their life. The house was full of noise and laughter, muddy footprints and childish arguments and bedtime stories. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Priscilla riding up into the mountains to the place where he'd first proposed. The October aspens were golden, the sky impossibly blue. "I've been thinking," he said as they sat together looking out over the valley where their ranch lay, "about that day in the general store when I first saw you crying over that silk fabric. I almost didn't say anything. I figured it wasn't my place, that you were above the notice of a drifting cowboy. I'm glad you did. Me too. Because these past 10 years have been the best of my life. You've made me happier than I ever thought possible. You've given me children, a home, a purpose beyond just surviving. You've been my partner in every sense of the word." Priscilla leaned against him, feeling his solid warmth. "I was so lost back then. I thought my life was set, that I had no choices. And then you showed me a different path. You gave me freedom and love and respect. You taught me that I could be strong, that my opinions mattered, that I was worth more than just being someone's ornamental wife. You were always strong. You just needed room to realize it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching an eagle circle overhead. Priscilla thought about Thornton, wondered briefly what her life would have been like if she'd stayed. She'd heard through her mother before she died that he'd married and divorced twice, that his controlling nature had driven both wives away eventually. She felt sorry for him, for a man who'd never learned that love was about partnership, not ownership. "Any regrets?" Isaac asked, as if reading her thoughts. "Not a single one. Well, maybe one. I wish I'd had the courage to leave sooner so we could have had more time together. We've got time. We've got the rest of our lives." And they did. They grew old together on that ranch, watching their children grow up and have children of their own. Daniel took over the horse breeding operation and expanded it. Margaret Rose married a doctor from Helena and brought him to live on the ranch, where he served the community for 40 years. Samuel became a lawyer, fighting for women's rights and using his position to help those who, like his mother, needed a way out of bad situations. Isaac and Priscilla became the heart of their community, known for their hospitality, their wisdom, and their obvious devotion to each other. Even in their 70s, they could be seen walking hand in hand, stealing kisses when they thought no one was looking, making their grandchildren giggle with their obvious affection. On a warm summer evening in 1924, 40 years after that fateful meeting in Loveland, Colorado, Isaac and Priscilla sat on the porch of their ranch house. They were surrounded by family, 3 children, 14 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren running around the yard. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose. "We did good, didn't we?" Isaac said, his hand finding hers as naturally as breathing. Priscilla squeezed his fingers, looking at the life they'd built, the family they'd created, the love that had sustained them through 4 decades. "We did better than good. We did extraordinary. I love you, Priscilla O'Brien. I've loved you since the moment I saw you in that store, and I'll love you until the day I die and beyond. I love you too, Isaac. You gave me everything, a way out, a way home, a way to be myself. You gave me a life worth living." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, their youngest great-grandchild, a girl of 3 named Priscilla after her great-grandmother, climbed into Isaac's lap. "Tell us a story, great-grandpa." Isaac looked at his wife, his eyes twinkling. "Should I tell them about the time your great-grandmother was the bravest woman in the world?" "I wasn't brave," Priscilla protested. "I was terrified. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear." He turned to the children gathering around. "This is a story about a woman who was trapped, and a man who offered her freedom, and how they found love in the most unexpected place." As Isaac began to tell their story to a new generation, Priscilla leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes, listening to her husband's voice weave their history into legend. She thought about the girl she'd been, standing in that store with tears on her face and a future she dreaded. She thought about the courage it had taken to put that candle in the window, to climb out and leave everything she'd known behind. It had been the scariest and best decision of her life, because it had led her here, to this porch, this family, this man who'd kept every promise he'd ever made to her. He'd honored her, respected her, loved her, and built a life with her where they both had voice and choice. She'd been trapped in a loveless engagement, and a cowboy had offered her a way out and a way home. But the home wasn't a place, she'd learned. It was him. It had always been him. And in finding freedom, she'd found something even more precious, a love that had lasted a lifetime and would echo in the hearts of their descendants for generations to come. Their story became a family legend, passed down through the years. The ranch they'd built remained in O'Brien hands for over a century, a testament to the foundation they'd laid. And in the family Bible, preserved under glass, was a pressed wildflower, the kind Isaac had picked for Priscilla during their courtship, and a note in fading ink. True love is built on freedom, respect, and choice. May all who come after us be so blessed. Priscilla and Isaac O'Brien lived into their 80s, dying within months of each other, their love story complete but never ending. Because real love doesn't end. It lives on in the children and grandchildren who carry forward the values they embodied, in the community they built, in the example they set of what partnership and mutual respect should look like. On quiet evenings when the wind blows across the Montana grasslands, some say you can still see two figures walking hand in hand through the golden aspens, a cowboy and his bride, forever bound by the choice they made to build a life together based on love, freedom, and unwavering devotion. Their story serves as a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose our own happiness, and that real love isn't about possession or control, but about giving someone the freedom to be fully themselves and loving them all the more for it. The legacy of Priscilla and Isaac O'Brien lived on not just in their bloodline, but in the very fabric of their community. The ranch became known as a place where those in difficult situations could find work and refuge, carrying forward the spirit of that night when a young woman climbed out a window toward freedom. Countless lives were touched by the example they set, proving that love built on respect and equality could withstand any storm and create something beautiful that lasted far beyond a single lifetime.